The universe had long since forgotten the name of Earth. Once a proud civilization, now a graveyard of metal and dust. The war had not been fair. Humanity stood no chance against the Zenith Dominion, an empire that crushed entire species with clinical precision. Planets were turned into barren husks, cities into unmarked ruins. Survivors? Few and scattered, reduced to scavengers in the shadows of a universe that had already moved on. Captain Elias Voss had seen it happen firsthand. He remembered the day Earth's defenses fell, when the Zenith fleet descended in perfect formation, raining fire that melted continents. He remembered the screams through the comms, the orders that turned into desperate pleas. He had fought until the last gun ran dry, piloted his last ship until the engine sputtered out. And when it was all over, he had been left with nothing but the cold truth: humanity had lost. That was 20 years ago. Now, Voss stood in the middle of a dead battlefield on the edge of known space, surrounded by the rusting corpses of Zenith war machines. The Dominion had no need to reclaim their wreckage. What use was there in salvaging from the defeated? But humans had always been different. Where others saw waste, they saw opportunity. "Commander, you need to see this." Dr. Marla Tsai's voice crackled through his earpiece. Voss turned, stepping over jagged metal remains as he made his way to her position. Tsai was kneeling beside a shattered Zenith command module, her gloved hands carefully brushing aside layers of dust. Embedded within the wreckage was a data core, its faint blue glow flickering in protest. Voss crouched beside her, still active, partially. Most of it's fried, but there's something here. I think the Zenith abandoned it too quickly. If we can pull the right sequences... Do it? Tsai nodded, pulling a small interface from her belt. The moment her device connected, the core hissed to life, streaming fragmented code in rapid bursts. Voss watched as symbols and diagrams flashed across her visor, the alien script reforming into something recognizable. Then she froze. This isn't just a command module," she murmured. "It's a blueprint." Voss frowned. A blueprint for what? Tsai's fingers flew across the interface, decrypting line after line. Finally, she exhaled, shaking her head in disbelief. "For us. For humans. The Zenith studied our biology, our engineering, our combat patterns. They called us primitive but dangerously adaptive. They saw potential in our ability to repurpose, to survive on nothing but scraps." Voss felt something stir in his chest, something that had been buried for 2 decades. They saw it, but they didn't fear it. They still thought we were weak. "Exactly," Tsai said, eyes flashing. "But they left behind everything we need. Their ships, their weapons, their tech. They discarded us like trash. And in doing so, they left us the tools to become something else." A low wind howled through the wasteland, rattling broken hulls like the ghosts of fallen soldiers. Voss rose to his feet, his jaw tightening. "Then let's prove them wrong." The hidden human enclave lay deep within an asteroid belt, a graveyard of abandoned ships and forgotten debris. Here, far from Zenith surveillance, survivors had built something resembling a colony. It wasn't much: patched hulls and dim corridors, engines that groaned with every restart. But it was enough. Enough to begin again. Voss and Tsai's arrival sent ripples through the settlement. The moment he stepped off his rusted transport, all eyes were on him. Engineers, scavengers, soldiers who had long since given up on fighting. He climbed onto a makeshift platform, raising his voice so there was no mistaking his intent. "For years, we've lived in the shadow of an empire that doesn't even remember our name. They crushed us, burned our worlds, left us to rot. But they made one mistake." He lifted the data core in his hand. "They left behind their own ruin, thinking we wouldn't know what to do with it, thinking we'd stay broken, thinking we'd stay dead." Silence, then a murmur, low but rising. "We take what they threw away," Voss continued, his voice turning to steel. "We turn their waste into weapons. We turn their ruins into warships. We build the thing they never saw coming. And when we rise again, we don't ask for mercy. We don't negotiate. We don't make the mistake of thinking they'll give us anything but another grave. The murmur became a roar. This is where humanity stops crawling in the dark. This is where we build something they will fear. A cheer erupted, voices overlapping in a declaration of defiance. Sparks flew from the hangars as engineers rushed to work. For the first time in 2 decades, there was no despair, only the furious energy of a species that refused to die. And in the heart of the scrapyard, among the rust and the wreckage, the first weapon of war was born. The forge was alive. Sparks rained from overhead cranes as welders fused alien plating to human-built frames. Engines scavenged from wrecked Zenith destroyers rumbled to life, their cores pulsing with unstable energy. The air was thick with smoke and determination, the sound of machinery drowning out everything else. Voss walked through the chaos, watching as engineers and soldiers worked side by side. Every scrap of metal, every discarded weapon, every forgotten piece of technology was being repurposed. Nothing was wasted. Humanity had no luxury for waste. Sai stood over a holographic projection, her fingers tracing lines of code. "We're making progress, but it's not pretty," she said without looking up. "Zenith technology doesn't integrate cleanly. Their systems are too refined, too structured. Ours are." Held together with spit and stubbornness, Voss finished. "Exactly." Sai turned to him. Exhaustion in her eyes, but something else too, something like excitement. "But that might be our advantage. Their weapons are made for precision. Ours will be made for chaos." Voss studied the projection. The machine they were building was unlike anything that had flown before. It had no smooth elegance, no perfect symmetry. It was a monster of steel and fire, a patchwork of stolen power and human ingenuity. "We'll call it the Revenant," he said. "A ghost they thought they buried." Sai smirked. "Fitting." The first test came faster than expected. The Revenant's frame was complete. A hulking war machine standing twice the height of any Zenith fighter, its surface an ugly fusion of salvaged armor and repurposed weaponry. Plasma cannons, ion scramblers, ballistic turrets, each one taken from enemy wreckage, each one reforged into something deadlier. Voss climbed into the cockpit, the interface flickering as it attempted to recognize him. Unlike Zenith's smooth neural links, the Revenant's controls were crude, demanding. The moment he engaged, his mind was flooded with data. Power surges, heat spikes, targeting arrays blinking in and out. It was messy. It was unstable. But it worked. Sai's voice crackled through the calm, "Think it'll hold." Voss flexed his fingers, feeling the machine respond, slow but obedient. Only one way to find out. The engines roared to life, a guttural, uneven sound that shook the entire hangar. The Revenant lifted from the ground, its system straining under the weight of its own brutality. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a mech. It was something in between, something new. The test drones activated, circling like vultures. Zenith technology was efficient, calculating. The drones moved with surgical precision, weaving through the air in tight formations. Voss watched them for a moment, then smiled. Precision could be predicted. He threw the Revenant forward, not with grace, not with strategy, but with brute force. The sheer weight of the machine sent shock waves through the air as it crashed into the first drone, crushing it on impact. The others hesitated just for a second, but that was enough. Voss spun the machine, targeting systems barely keeping up. He fired everything at once. Plasma cannons overloaded, ion blasts shredded through shields, ballistic rounds tore metal apart. It wasn't efficient, it wasn't elegant, but it was devastating. The last drone tried to retreat. Voss didn't give it the chance. He lunged, grabbing it with a makeshift claw, another salvaged piece of Zenith tech, now functioning as a weapon of raw destruction. The drone struggled for a moment before Voss crushed it like scrap. Silence. Then Sai's voice, awed and amused. "Well, that was terrifying." Voss exhaled, the adrenaline settling. The Revenant was clunky, unrefined, dangerous even to its own pilot. But it worked. He brought it down, landing with a heavy thud. The hangar erupted in cheers. Mechanics swarmed forward, already discussing improvements. More power, better stabilization, stronger armor. Voss climbed out, meeting Tsai's gaze. "It's ugly," she grinned. "It's perfect." Word spread fast. The Revenant wasn't just a prototype. It was proof. Proof that humans didn't need pristine technology, didn't need the precision of the Zenith. They had something better. They had adaptability. Other engineers began designing their own versions. Some were faster, some heavier, some specialized in brute force melee combat. The scrap they had collected was no longer just salvage. It was a future where humanity wasn't just surviving. It was preparing to fight. Voss watched as more war machines took shape, each one different, each one unpredictable. No two pilots would fly the same way. No two ships would fight the same way. The Zenith wouldn't know what to expect. For the first time in 20 years, humanity had an advantage. And soon, the universe would know. The Revenant was only the beginning. Across the hidden enclave, the scrapyards became assembly lines, the wreckage of old battles transforming into something new. Each war machine was a unique beast, patched together from stolen Zenith parts and human ingenuity. There were no standardized models, no uniform designs. Every pilot had a different build, a different strategy. Unpredictability was their greatest weapon. Voss oversaw it all, moving through the chaos of engineers welding armor plating, mechanics fine-tuning plasma cores, and pilots testing out control systems barely held together by makeshift wiring. Each success pushed them closer to something impossible. Each failure was another lesson, another adjustment. Tsai had buried herself in code, reverse engineering Zenith targeting algorithms. "They rely on patterns," she explained, eyes locked on cascading streams of data. "Zenith machines process threats based on probability. They expect a certain response. Countermaneuvers, attack vectors. But we don't have patterns." Voss nodded, watching as pilots trained in erratic movements. Instead of precision dogfights, they adapted, turning the battlefield into chaos. No smooth turns, no predictable formations, just raw, aggressive, calculated mayhem. Zenith technology wasn't designed for unpredictability. It was designed to counter logic. Humans, at their best, were anything but logical. The first real test came when a Zenith scout ship wandered too close. It was small, a single pilot craft, likely patrolling the outskirts of the system. The Enclave had gone undetected for years, but they had known it was only a matter of time before something stumbled too close. Voss didn't hesitate. "We take it. No transmissions, no warnings. It disappears." The Revenant launched first, its raw power shaking the ground as it roared into the void. 3 other war machines followed, smaller, faster, each one a twisted amalgamation of human and Zenith tech. The scout ship reacted immediately, its sensors locking onto the incoming signatures. But something was wrong. It hesitated. The targeting system faltered. This wasn't a known threat. It wasn't rebel fighters using outdated human ships. It wasn't scavengers in barely functioning craft. This was something else. Voss capitalized on that hesitation. He fired, a chaotic spread of plasma and ballistics, forcing the scout to evade wildly. No clean maneuvers, no obvious attack vectors, just relentless, disorganized destruction. The enemy pilot struggled to counter. Its ship designed for precise engagements, not sheer, unrelenting aggression. One of the smaller war machines closed the distance, a jagged blade of repurposed Zenith alloy tearing through the scout's wing. The ship spiraled, its systems failing under the assault. "Disable it," Voss ordered. "We take the pilot alive." A well-placed ion burst crippled the scout, sending it drifting. The battle was over in seconds. The enemy never even got a distress signal out. Back in the Enclave, the captured Zenith pilot was dragged from the wreckage, restrained but alert. It wasn't human, tall, angular, its dark exoskeleton gleaming under the dim lights of the hangar. Its golden eyes flickered with something close to confusion. It studied the war machine surrounding it, eyes narrowing at the fusion of Zenith technology and crude human engineering. It saw the patchwork armor, the unstable energy cores, the weapons ripped straight from its own people's fleets. It saw the chaos, and for the first time, it looked afraid. Voss stepped forward, meeting its gaze. "You know what this means, don't you?" His voice was steady, unwavering. "You thought we were gone. You thought we were finished." The Zenith didn't respond, but the flicker in its expression said everything. "You called us primitive," Voss continued, his tone sharpening. "But we did what you couldn't. We took your perfection and made it better. We took your logic and turned it against you. You built weapons to fight predictable wars. We built weapons for war itself." The Zenith's mandibles twitched, its fingers curling into fists. Fear turned to something else. Understanding. Voss leaned in, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Run. Tell them what you saw. Tell them what's coming." He stepped back, nodding to the guards. The Zenith was escorted to an escape pod, launched back into the void. It would reach its fleet. It would deliver the warning, and the Dominion would finally know the truth. Humanity wasn't just alive. It was preparing to burn their empire to the ground. The warning had been delivered. The Dominion knew. The next step was inevitable. A Zenith response fleet would come, not just to investigate, but to erase any trace of what they had seen. The Dominion never allowed anomalies to persist. They crushed them before they could become threats. That was exactly what Voss was counting on. The Enclave worked faster than ever. Every set of hands was on deck, fortifying defenses, weaponizing salvage, ensuring that when the Zenith returned, they would not be facing a scattered band of survivors. They would be facing the resurrection of something they had failed to kill. Sai stood over the tactical display, tracking incoming signals. Multiple signatures on long-range scans. Standard formation. Destroyers, gunships, one capital-class carrier. Voss absorbed the information. They think this will be an extermination. They don't know what they're walking into, Sai said. Voss smirked. They will. The battle did not begin with a declaration. There was no negotiation. The moment the Zenith fleet arrived in system, they moved in calculated precision, their ships sweeping the asteroid belt with targeting beams, scanning for the anomaly their scout had reported. They found it when the first of their destroyers exploded. The humans struck from the debris, war machines launching from concealed positions, engines screaming as they tore through the fleet's perimeter. The Zenith were disciplined, but discipline was predictable. Their response was immediate, their formations shifting to counter the threat. Voss led the charge, the Revenant hurtling through the chaos, its weapons spewing destruction in all directions. His war machine wasn't built for finesse. It was a battering ram, a force of nature. Plasma blasts seared past him, but he never stayed in one place long enough for the Zenith to pin him down. One of the gunships turned its cannons toward him. He surged forward instead of dodging, slamming the Revenant's reinforced frame into its hull. The impact crumpled the ship's armor, sending it spiraling. He followed up with a point-blank blast, tearing straight through its core. The battle unfolded exactly as planned. The Zenith expected tactics. They got carnage. The human war machines moved with chaotic unpredictability, striking fast, retreating before counterfire could lock onto them. The Dominion's greatest strength, its reliance on precision, was turned into its greatest weakness. Tsai's voice cut through the comms. The carrier is repositioning. They're trying to fall back. They finally realize this isn't a skirmish, Voss muttered. He spotted the massive vessel attempting to pull out of the engagement zone, its engines flaring as it tried to regroup. If it escaped, the Dominion would analyze the battle, adapt, return with something stronger. That couldn't happen. Cut off their retreat, he ordered. The response was immediate. War machines broke from their engagements, converging on the carrier like predators sensing wounded prey. The massive ship's defenses lit up, firing in all directions, but it was too late. One of the human ships, a heavy bruiser cobbled together from a Zenith battleship's wreckage, rammed full speed into the carrier's flank, detonating its stolen warhead payload on impact. The explosion rippled through its structure, shields flickering as its energy reserves buckled under the strain. Voss seized the moment. He pushed the Revenant forward, charging through the chaos, locking onto the exposed command deck. His weapons discharged everything they had left. Ballistics shredded the hull. Plasma fire tore through the bridge. The carrier convulsed, its engines failing, its structure collapsing in on itself. And then, with a final, deafening explosion, it was gone. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining Zenith ships, leaderless and in disarray, attempted to flee. Some were cut down before they could break away. Others managed to vanish into the void. It didn't matter. The message had been sent. Voss stood in the aftermath, breathing heavily, watching as the remnants of the Zenith fleet faded from the system. For the first time in history, the Dominion had been driven back. Not by an empire, not by an organized military, but by what they had discarded as trash. Tsai's voice came through, quiet but firm. "They'll come back." Voss nodded. Good, because this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. The Dominion had ruled through fear, through absolute power. But now, for the first time, they had something to fear. Humanity had risen from the ruins, forged in the wreckage of war, built from the scraps of its own destruction. They had become the terror in the dark, the nightmare lurking in the debris, the force that could not be crushed. And the Zenith Dominion had just realized, too late, that what they had thrown away had come back to haunt them.